the building learned my footsteps faster than it should have. On my second night, the lights turned on before I reached the hallway, and that shouldn't have been possible since the motion sensors were cheap and slow, and always lagged by a few seconds during my training shift, and I remember stopping in place just to see if I was imagining it, and the lights stayed on steadily ahead of me, as if something already knew I was coming and was waiting for me to catch up. And I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the hum of the air vents and the faint ticking sound that came from inside the walls. And I told myself it was nothing, because night shifts do that to your head. And I had just started and didn't want to be the kind of person who quit because of nerves. So I kept walking and tried to focus on the routine, because the routine was supposed to keep everything predictable and safe. And the supervisor had been very clear about that when he handed me the laminated checklist on my first night, and told me that as long as I followed it in order, nothing would surprise me, and nothing ever happened here anyway. And he said it with the kind of smile people use when they're skipping over details. They don't want to explain. And I didn't press him because I needed the job, and the pay was better than anything else I could get on short notice. And the building itself didn't look like the kind of place where anything could happen, because it was just a corporate office complex with gray walls and low ceilings and long carpeted hallways that absorbed sound in a way that made you feel like you were walking through a place that didn't want to be disturbed. And the night shift was supposed to be quiet and boring. And honestly, that was what I wanted at the time, because boring meant stable, and stable meant I could get my life back under control. And the first hour went exactly like they said it would, with me sitting at the front desk, watching the monitors and flipping through a paperback book I didn't really care about, while the clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have, and the cameras showed nothing but empty hallways and parked cars, and the occasional flicker when a fluorescent light buzzed itself back to life. And I started to relax until I remembered the one rule that wasn't written on the checklist, but was mentioned casually, as my supervisor was walking me out on my first night. And he said it in the same tone: someone might remind you not to forget your lunch. And he said, if you ever hear footsteps behind you, don't turn around right away. Just keep walking and count to 10 first. And then, if the sound stops, you can turn around. But if it doesn't, you just keep going until you reach a door and go through it, and lock it and call security. And I laughed when he said it because it sounded like a joke. And he didn't laugh back. And instead, he looked at his watch and said, "You'll be fine. It hardly ever happens anymore." And that word "anymore" stuck with me. But I pushed it aside because I didn't hear anything behind me that night or the next one. And by the third night, I was already settling into the rhythm of it, with the slow hours and the way the building seemed to breathe differently after midnight. And I learned the little noises like the pop from the heating system at exactly 12:40 and the soft clack from the elevator cables, even when the elevator wasn't moving, and the faint rushing sound near the stairwell that I assumed was air pressure equalizing, and everything felt manageable until I started noticing small inconsistencies that were easy to explain individually, but uncomfortable when I thought about them together, like the fact that the security camera in hallway C would sometimes show the lights off, even though I had just walked through there and turned them on manually, because the sensors didn't always work. And when I checked the timestamp, it would say the feed was live and current, and there was no delay. And when I went back in person, the lights would be on again, as if nothing had happened. And I told myself it was just a glitch, and added it to the growing list of things I planned to mention to maintenance, even though I never actually did. And then there was the way the building reacted to my schedule changes, because on nights when I took my break earlier than usual, the vending machine lights would already be on when I reached the break room, and on nights when I stayed at the desk longer than planned, the hallway lights near the restrooms would stay dark until I stepped into them, and then flick on instantly, like they were responding directly to me. And I know how that sounds. And I would have rolled my eyes at myself if someone else had told me this. But it was the accumulation of it that started to bother me. The sense that the building wasn't just responding to motion, but anticipating it. And the feeling intensified when I started hearing the footsteps, and the first time it happened, I almost didn't notice because they were so soft and matched my pace exactly. And I thought at first that it was just the echo of my own shoes on the carpeted floor, somehow bouncing back at me. And I slowed down to test it, and the sound slowed too, and my stomach tightened because I remembered the rule and the count, and I kept walking and counted silently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the sound stopped on 10 exactly. Like it had been waiting for me to finish, and I stopped and stood there with my heart pounding and every instinct screaming at me to turn around and look. And I waited another second, just to be sure. And then I turned around, and there was nothing there. Just the empty hallway stretching back toward the desk, with the lights glowing softly, and the cameras watching from their corners. And I laughed out loud. Then, because I was more embarrassed than scared. And I told myself, this was exactly what people warned you about with night work and isolation, and your brain filling in gaps. And I went back to my rounds and didn't think about it again until it happened the next night and the night after that. And each time it was the same, with the footsteps matching my pace and stopping exactly when I reached 10. And the consistency of it started to feel wrong, because random noises don't follow rules. And whatever this was seemed to understand the rule better than I did. And that was when I realized something else that made my skin crawl, which was that the footsteps always started in the same place, right after I passed the framed photo near the stairwell on the second floor. And I hadn't paid much attention to that photo before, because it was just one of those generic corporate pictures of a team smiling awkwardly in front of the building when it first opened, and I couldn't even tell you what year it was taken, because the plaque beneath it had been removed at some point. But once I noticed the pattern, I started watching the photo as I walked past it, and I could have sworn that the people in it were standing slightly closer together than they had been before. And I told myself that was ridiculous, because photos don't change, and stress does weird things to perception, and I tried to avoid looking at it after that. But it was hard, because it was positioned at eye level, and the glass reflected the hallway behind me, just enough that I could see movement if there was any. And that was the worst part, because even when there was no sound, I sometimes thought I saw a darker shape, moving in the reflection a fraction of a second after I passed. And I never turned around when that happened, because the rule didn't say anything about reflections. And I didn't want to test what would happen if I broke it, and I started taking my breaks in different places to avoid hallway C and the stairwell altogether. And the building seemed to adjust to that too, because the vending machine jammed on nights when I tried to eat early, and the bathroom lights flickered when I stayed inside longer than usual, and the monitors at the desk would briefly lose signal on the cameras covering the areas I avoided, and then come back on once I eventually walked through them, like the building was nudging me back into my routine. And the most unsettling part was how easy it was to slip back into that routine, because humans like patterns, and once I accepted that the night shift had its own strange rules, it felt easier to follow them than to fight them. And that was when I started to suspect that the building wasn't just learning my footsteps, but my habits and my expectations, and my tolerance for unease. And I don't know exactly when the feeling shifted from discomfort to something closer to being observed. But I remember the moment I realized I was no longer alone in my thoughts, because I was standing at the desk, flipping through the logbook when I found an entry written in my handwriting that I didn't remember writing. And it wasn't anything dramatic, just a simple note that said, "Lights in hallway C delayed again at 02:14. And I checked the timestamp, and it matched the current time exactly. And I felt cold all over because my pen was still capped and sitting where I always left it. And I hadn't walked through hallway C yet that night. And that was when the footsteps started again, softly behind me, perfectly matching my pace, even though I wasn't moving at all. And I stood there, frozen, listening to them take one slow step after another. And I realized with a sinking feeling that counting to 10 wouldn't help me this time, because I hadn't started walking. And I didn't know if the rule still applied when the building decided to come to me. Instead, I stayed perfectly still, with my hands resting on the edge of the desk, and the footsteps continued behind me at the same slow, measured pace they always used when they were matching me. Except now, there was nothing to match. And that was when I understood that the sound wasn't reacting anymore. It was following its own version of the routine, and I counted anyway, because counting was the only thing I had, and I reached 10, and the sound didn't stop. So I did what the rule said, and kept going, even though my legs felt heavy and wrong, and I walked toward the nearest office door and pushed it open, and stepped inside and locked it, and sat on the floor with my back against the door, listening to the sound stop right outside, as if it had simply reached the end of its path and didn't need to go any further. And I waited there longer than I should have, until my breathing slowed and my watch ticked, and nothing else happened. And eventually, I unlocked the door and went back to the desk, and everything looked normal again, and the monitors showed empty hallways and parked cars, and the logbook entry was still there in my handwriting, and I crossed it out and wrote a note beneath it that said possible duplicate entry. And I don't know why I did that, because no one else ever read the logbook at night, and I think part of me wanted to leave a trail behind just in case someone needed proof that this wasn't all in my head. And after that night, the building stopped pretending it wasn't paying attention, and small things escalated into patterns I couldn't ignore, like how the elevator would already be waiting for me on the floor I planned to visit next, or how the lights would turn off behind me in long, straight lines, like a path being erased once I passed, and I started hearing my own movements delayed in the cameras, as if the feed was replaying me a few seconds late, and then catching up. And sometimes, when I checked the monitors, I would see myself standing somewhere I hadn't reached yet. And when I got there later, everything would already be arranged the way it appeared on the screen. And I stopped trusting the cameras after I saw one version of me pause in front of the stairwell photo and turn slightly toward it, even though I knew I never did that. And when I reached that spot, myself, the photo glass was warm to the touch, like it had been under direct sunlight, and the faces inside the frame seemed clearer somehow, with their smiles sharper and their eyes more focused. And I started avoiding that hallway altogether, until one night I realized the checklist had changed, and there was a new line added at the bottom in neat block letters that said, "Verify presence on all floors." And I stood there staring at it, knowing it hadn't been there before, and knowing that if I ignored it, the building would find a way to make me comply. And I told myself I would just do a quick sweep and get it over with, and I took the stairs instead of the elevator, because I didn't trust enclosed spaces anymore. And as I climbed, I noticed the sound of my breathing echoed slightly ahead of me instead of behind. And the lights on the landings turned on earlier and earlier with each floor, like the building was rushing me. And when I reached the top floor, I found the hallway lights already on and the photo from the second floor mounted at the end of the corridor where it didn't belong. And this time, the people inside it were no longer standing still. because one of them had their head turned slightly toward the glass, and I knew without looking that they were watching me, and the footsteps started again. Except this time, they were coming from ahead of me and behind me at the same time, and I didn't know which direction counted as forward anymore. And I realized then that the building didn't want to scare me away. It wanted me to stay because staying meant learning, and learning meant blending in. And I backed away slowly, and the footsteps matched my retreat perfectly, and stopped when I stopped. And I reached the stairwell and went down 2 steps at a time until I was back at the desk, and everything looked normal again, except the logbook now had several new entries written in my handwriting, describing things I hadn't experienced yet. And when I checked the timestamps, they were all scheduled for later that night, and I understood that the building wasn't predicting my actions. It was rehearsing them, and all I had to do was keep following the routine, and everything would stay consistent. And that was the moment I realized I could never really quit, because even if I left, the building had already learned enough about me to carry on without my physical presence. And sometimes, now when I'm at home, lying awake in the dark, I hear the faint sound of footsteps matching my breathing, and I don't turn around because I don't know if the rule still applies outside the building or if it ever really ended. And I've started noticing that the lights in my hallway turn on just before I reach them. And I think somewhere a checklist is being updated with my name still on it, and the night shift is simply waiting for me to remember where I belong. I tried to convince myself after that night that the unease would fade once I stopped working there, and for a while I almost believed it, because the next morning I emailed my supervisor and told him I wouldn't be coming back, and he replied faster than I expected with a short message that said, "Understood, take care, and nothing else." And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because even after I turned in my badge and cleared my locker, the sense of being accounted for didn't go away. And the first sign of that was how my sleep changed, because I started waking up at the same times. I used to do my rounds without an alarm, and I would lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the next internal checkpoint, like my body had memorized a schedule it couldn't let go of. And when I finally fell back asleep, I dreamed of hallways that stretched longer than they should have, and doors that opened only after I reached for them. And in the dreams, I always knew exactly where I was supposed to be, even though I couldn't remember how I knew. And that certainty was the most disturbing part, because it felt borrowed, not earned, like instructions quietly handed to me by something patient and methodical. And I started noticing small things during the day too, like how the lights in my apartment building hallway would turn on just before I stepped out of the elevator, or how the automatic doors at the grocery store would slide open a second earlier than usual. And these were normal things on their own, but together they felt like echoes of the same anticipation I had felt at work. And I tried changing my routine to shake it off by taking different routes and staying up late or going to bed early. But the anticipation adapted, because the world seemed to adjust to whatever choice I made, as if the act of deciding was the only input it needed. And I began to suspect that what the building had learned wasn't just my footsteps, but the way I hesitated before making choices, and the patterns in my attention, and the small tells that revealed what I was about to do next. And once that realization settled in, it became harder to ignore the quiet moments when I felt like something was checking in on me, especially at night when the city went still, and the hum of distant traffic faded into a low, constant presence that reminded me of the air vents and the walls and the way the building breathed. And I started leaving a light on when I slept, even though I never used to, because the darkness felt different now, less empty and more expectant. And sometimes, when I woke in the middle of the night, I would hear a faint sound that reminded me of footsteps, but softer, like someone walking on carpet far away. And I would count without meaning to. And sometimes I reached 10, and nothing happened. And sometimes I didn't reach 10, because the sound would stop on its own. And those nights were worse, because I didn't know what had prompted it to stop. And after a while, I realized I was doing something else, without thinking about it, which was documenting my days the same way I had documented my shifts, because I started keeping a notebook where I wrote down the times I woke up and the routes I took, and the moments when things seemed to anticipate me. And I told myself it was just to prove to myself that I was imagining patterns where there were none. But the truth was I was afraid of forgetting the rules entirely, because forgetting felt dangerous, like stepping into a hallway without knowing which doors were safe. And one afternoon, while I was flipping through the notebook, I noticed an entry I didn't remember writing that said, "Presence verified," and beneath it a time that hadn't happened yet. And my hands shook when I saw it, because the handwriting was mine and the phrasing was familiar, and I crossed it out and tore out the page and threw it away. And for a while things were quiet again, as if whatever had been watching me had paused to reassess. And those quiet days were almost worse than the active ones, because they felt like the calm before something resumed. And during that time, I avoided thinking about the building as much as possible, but it had a way of reappearing in small, harmless references, like when I passed an office complex that looked similar, or saw a corporate team photo in a hallway, and felt a sudden urge to look closer and check if anyone had shifted their gaze. And I never did, because I was afraid of confirming that the connection still existed. And eventually, I found another job that involved working late, but not overnight. And I told myself that would help, because it would re-anchor my schedule to something human and predictable. And for the first few weeks it did, because being around people, even quiet, tired people, made the world feel less focused on me alone. And the anticipation faded into the background, and I almost felt normal again, until one night I stayed late to finish a project, and realized I was the only one left in the building. And the moment that thought crossed my mind, the lights in the hallway outside my office turned on in sequence leading toward the exit, and my stomach dropped, because the sequence was wrong, because they were turning on in the order I would normally take if I were leaving, and not in the order triggered by motion. And I stayed seated for a long time, staring at the doorway, trying not to think about rules and counting and presence. And eventually the lights turned off again, and I told myself it was just the building's energy saving system resetting, and I left without incident. But on the walk home, I noticed my reflection in the dark windows of closed shops lagged behind me, slightly like a delayed camera feed, and I walked faster, and it caught up, and then fell behind again. And when I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, listening and counting. And the sound of my own breathing felt too loud and too measured. And over time, the sense of being monitored settled into something more subtle and insidious, which was the feeling of being remembered, because it wasn't just that something anticipated my actions, it was that it seemed to expect them. And sometimes, when I made a choice that felt spontaneous, like taking a sudden detour or stopping to look psychologist at something trivial, the world around me would hesitate, as if recalculating, and then resume in a way that made me feel like I had corrected myself back onto an approved path. And I started wondering if free will was just another routine that could be learned, and once learned, could be reinforced, until deviation felt uncomfortable, And I don't know how long I lived like that, because time felt different when every small decision carried weight and meaning. But eventually, I stopped writing things down, and stopped counting, and stopped trying to resist, because resistance required attention. And attention felt like an invitation, and things were quieter when I didn't acknowledge them. And that quiet lasted for months, and maybe it would have lasted forever, if not for the night. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my apartment hallway, and I knew immediately that this was different, because the sound wasn't matching my breathing or my movement. It was steady and independent and moving toward my bedroom door. And I lay there, frozen, staring at the faint light seeping in from the hallway, and the footsteps stopped just outside my door. And I counted, because counting was automatic by then. And when I reached 10, the sound didn't stop, because it was already still. And after a long moment, the light under the door brightened, as if someone had turned on the hallway light, and I realized with a dull, sinking clarity that whatever had learned me didn't need the building anymore, because the building had only ever been a place to practice. And I don't know how long I stayed there listening, because eventually the light dimmed and the footsteps resumed moving away, and the apartment fell silent again. And the next morning everything looked normal, and I went about my day and almost convinced myself it had been a dream, except when I checked my phone and saw a note saved in my reminders app that I didn't remember creating, and it simply said, "Presence verified at 02:14, and that time matched exactly the time I had reached 10. And now, when I walk through the world, I feel like I'm moving through a familiar layout that I no longer control. And sometimes, when I pause for no reason at all, I get the sense that something pauses with me, waiting patiently. And I don't look for it anymore, because I know it already knows where I am and how I move and how long I can stand still before I start counting again. And somewhere there is a routine that includes me even now, quietly unfolding, whether I participate or not. After that night, I stopped trying to label what was happening because labels made it feel smaller, and whatever this was did not feel small or chaotic. It felt organized in a way that was almost comforting, if I didn't think too hard about what that meant, and I noticed that when I accepted the rhythm of it, my days went more smoothly, like traffic lights turning green just as I reached them, or elevators arriving without delay, and even conversations flowing in a way that required less effort from me. And I would catch myself appreciating these moments before the unease followed, because appreciation felt like acknowledgement, and acknowledgement felt like consent. And I didn't know what consenting actually did anymore, but I knew it mattered. And there were nights when I would sit in my living room with all the lights off just to see if the darkness would stay still. And sometimes it did. And sometimes the glow from the streetlight outside would brighten slightly, as if compensating. And I stopped inviting people over because I couldn't stand the way the environment behaved around them, with doors opening a beat too early, or the air feeling tighter when they sat in certain chairs. And once a friend joked that my place felt staged like a show apartment, and I laughed along, but inside I felt a sharp twist of fear, because staging implied an audience. And after that, I rearranged my furniture, even though it didn't help, because the anticipation adapted and learned the new layout faster than I expected. And it wasn't just physical spaces anymore. It was time itself, because events seemed to queue up in a way that left no gaps. Like every pause I allowed was immediately filled by the next expected thing. And when I tried to sit still and do nothing, the stillness felt crowded, like something else was occupying the same moment with me. And I began to understand that the building had never been the source. It had been the interface, a controlled environment where learning could happen cleanly and efficiently. And once the learning was complete, there was no reason to stay confined to one structure. and I thought about the checklist often, not the physical one, but the idea of it. The concept of tasks unfolding in order and being verified and logged. And I wondered if my own memories were being used the same way as checkpoints. And sometimes I would remember something mundane from my past with unusual clarity, like the exact pattern of carpet in my childhood home or the sound of a refrigerator humming late at night. And I would feel that same sense of being reviewed and confirmed. And I stopped trusting nostalgia because it felt like another access point. And one evening, while washing dishes, I realized I had been humming softly without noticing, and the tune was unfamiliar, but repetitive. And when I stopped the hum, the sound of water in the sink seemed to take over the rhythm seamlessly and continue it. And I stood there, listening, feeling a slow chill spread through me, because the transition was too smooth, and I turned off the faucet, and the silence that followed felt incomplete, like a sentence cut short, and I found myself humming again, just to finish it. And the moment I did, the tension eased, and I understood then that participation didn't always look like obedience. Sometimes it looked like relief, and that was more dangerous because relief made it easy to forget why you were afraid in the first place. And over time, I stopped noticing when things anticipated me, because it became the default. And when something didn't happen the way it was supposed to, I felt a sharp discomfort, like a missed step on a staircase. And I would pause and wait until the environment corrected itself. And that scared me more than anything else, because it meant the expectation had moved inside me, and I started wondering how many of my choices were still mine, and how many were simply the path of least resistance laid out ahead of me. And once that question took root, it was hard to ignore, because every time I tried to do something impulsive, like skipping a meal, or staying up too late, or leaving a task unfinished, the world around me seemed to gently but firmly guide me back into sequence, and nothing ever forced me outright. There were no locks or alarms or confrontations, just the subtle pressure of inconvenience and discomfort until compliance felt like the rational option. And I thought about telling someone again, but the words felt slippery, like they didn't quite fit the shape of what I was experiencing, and I couldn't explain it without sounding like I was describing anxiety or routine or coincidence. And maybe that's what made it so effective, because it hid inside normal explanations and wore them like a disguise. And sometimes I wondered how many other people were part of similar routines without realizing it, because the city at night was full of synchronized movements and predictable flows, and maybe the building had been a test case or a node in a larger system that rewarded regularity and punished deviation quietly and patiently. And the idea that it might be bigger than me was both terrifying and oddly reassuring, because it meant I wasn't special, just compatible. And that compatibility was something that could be replicated and refined. And one night, as I lay awake, listening to the distant sounds of the city, I realized I hadn't heard the footsteps in a long time, and the absence of them felt wrong, like a missing heartbeat. And I lay there, counting without meaning to, and nothing happened. And I reached 10 and kept counting, and reached 20 and 30, and the silence remained, and I felt a surge of panic, because silence without response meant I was off schedule, and off schedule meant unverified, and I didn't know what happened to things that weren't verified anymore. And the next morning, I woke to a notification on my phone from a calendar app I didn't remember installing, and it showed a simple daily entry, repeating indefinitely at the same time each night. And the entry was labeled check-in, and there was no option to delete it, only to mark it complete. And that evening, when the time came, I felt a familiar pressure settle over me, and I marked it complete. And the pressure lifted, and I sat there staring at the screen, realizing that The routine no longer required physical movement or specific locations. It just required acknowledgement. And I thought about ignoring it the next night, but the idea filled me with a deep, uneasy dread that felt disproportionate and revealing. And so I didn't. And days turned into weeks, again, and the check-ins became part of my life, like brushing my teeth or locking the door, and occasionally the label would change slightly, from check-in to verify presence or confirm status, and once it read, observe surroundings. And when I marked it complete, the lights in my apartment flickered briefly in a way that felt like approval, and I stopped questioning it, because questioning didn't change anything. And I was tired, and tired. People accept things they would once have fought, and sometimes late at night, I think about the building and wonder if it's still there, and if someone else is walking those hallways counting their steps and telling themselves it's just nerves and routine, and I want to warn them. But I don't know what I would say, because the truth is, the building never did anything that couldn't be explained, and neither does whatever remains now. And explanations are the easiest things in the world to accept when they let you sleep. And as I finish thinking this, I notice that I've been counting again without realizing it. And I stop at 9 and wait, and the room feels attentive and patient. And I understand that whatever is keeping track of me doesn't need me to finish anymore, because it already knows exactly where I am and how long I will stay here before moving on. And that knowledge hangs in the air like a held breath that never quite gets released. There are moments now when I feel like I'm standing slightly behind myself, watching my own life unfold with a sense of inevitability that's hard to describe, because it isn't dramatic or panicked, it's calm and procedural, like watching a process complete itself. And those moments come most often when I'm alone and quiet and not actively thinking about anything in particular. And that's when I notice how the world seems to settle into place around me, as if relieved that I've stopped interfering. And I remember how during my training shift, the supervisor emphasized that the night was about monitoring, not intervening. And that phrase comes back to me often because monitoring implies distance and patience, and the assumption that whatever is being observed will continue on its own without needing direction. And sometimes I wonder if that's all I am. Now a monitored variable moving within acceptable parameters, and I try to test the boundaries in small ways, like delaying the nightly check-in by a few minutes, or sitting in a different room than usual when I mark it complete, and the system responds subtly with a longer pause before the pressure lifts, or a faint flicker of light that feels more like a reminder than a reprimand. And these reactions reassure me in a strange way because they confirm that the connection is still active, and I know that sounds backwards, but uncertainty is worse than oversight, because oversight at least follows rules, and I've always been good at learning rules and following them. And maybe that's why the building took to me so quickly, because I fit into its logic without resistance. And the thought that this might be true makes me feel complicit in a way that's hard to sit with. And I try to recall who I was before the night shift, before routines became something that felt external and imposed rather than self-chosen. But those memories feel flatter now, like copies of copies. And I can't tell if that's just time eroding detail or something else smoothing out the edges that don't serve a purpose anymore. And occasionally, I catch myself thinking ahead. In the same way the building used to anticipate me, like knowing which email will arrive next, or when a phone will ring, and most of the time I'm right. And when I'm wrong, the surprise feels jarring, rather than delightful. And I've started avoiding surprises because they disrupt the flow. And disruption draws attention, and attention feels dangerous, even if I can't articulate why. And sometimes when I'm walking through a quiet street late at night, I feel the urge to slow down or stop entirely, just to see if the world will continue without me. And when I do, the sounds around me seem to fade slightly, like everything is waiting for my next move. And that waiting feels heavy, like a hand hovering just above my shoulder. And I resume walking, and the sounds return. And the relief that follows is immediate and unsettling, because it means I've learned to associate compliance with comfort. And I don't know when that association formed or how deeply it's rooted. And there are times when I think about deliberately breaking the routine in a significant way, like traveling somewhere unfamiliar or staying awake all night without marking the check-in or turning off my phone entirely and letting whatever happens happen. But the thought fills me with a tight, controlled fear that feels less like anxiety and more like an internal safeguard activating. And I imagine that this is how systems protect themselves, not with force, but with aversion, making deviation feel unbearable. And maybe that's what happened to the people in the photo in the building, because they looked comfortable in a way that was unsettling, like they had accepted their positions and stopped wanting to leave. And that memory surfaces often now, especially when I catch my reflection in glass or dark screens and notice that my expression has settled into something neutral and composed that I don't remember choosing. And sometimes I practice making faces just to prove I can still change them, and the results feel exaggerated, like I'm performing expressions rather than feeling them. And the idea that my internal state might be drifting towards some optimal baseline makes me think about the word presence and how it used to mean physically being somewhere and now feels more abstract, like a status that can be verified remotely and maintained with minimal effort. And I wonder if presence without agency is just occupancy, and whether that's enough for whatever is keeping track of me. And I think about the building less as a place now, and more as a process that can manifest anywhere conditions allow. And those conditions don't seem rare, because most environments are built around predictability, and most people are encouraged to follow routines and measure themselves against expectations. And maybe the building was simply an early adopter, a controlled environment, where something discovered how effective those principles could be when applied patiently and without visible force. And maybe the night shift wasn't about security at all, but about observation and refinement. And sometimes, when I'm marking the nightly check-in, I imagine a logbook somewhere filling itself out with entries that describe my day in concise, neutral language, and I imagine that logbook being reviewed and approved and filed away. And the thought brings a strange sense of closure, as if my existence is being properly accounted for. And that thought scares me enough that I sometimes hesitate before marking complete, just to feel the pressure build and remind myself that I can still choose when to comply. And that hesitation is one of the few things that still feels like mine. Even though I know it's probably already anticipated and factored in. And I don't know how this ends, or if it ends at all, because systems like this don't need conclusions. They just need continuity. And I've become very good at providing that. And there are nights when I sit in the dark, counting softly under my breath, not because I hear footsteps, but because the counting feels like a connection to who I was, when rules were warnings rather than comforts. And sometimes I stop at 9 and wait, and the waiting stretches and nothing happens. And in that moment, there's a fragile sense of possibility, like maybe I could stand up and leave, or turn everything off and step out of sequence entirely. And the possibility lingers just long enough to feel real before it fades into the familiar calm of things, continuing as expected. And I realize that the most unsettling part isn't that something is watching me, it's that it doesn't need to anymore, because I've learned how to watch myself and keep everything in order. And as I sit here now, aware of my breathing and the quiet alignment of the room around me, I feel that attentive stillness again, And I know without checking the time that the nightly check-in is approaching, and the knowledge settles into place effortlessly. And I understand that whatever began in that building didn't follow me home, so much as it finished its work and moved on to the next phase. And I am left with the routine it taught me, unfolding automatically and smoothly. And as long as I keep counting and marking and moving, when expected, everything will remain calm and consistent and indistinguishable from normal. And I suspect that if I ever stop completely, the silence that follows won't be empty, it will be corrective. And the thought of that silence is enough to keep me right where I am, moving forward at a measured pace through a life that feels increasingly like a well-lit hallway, where the lights always come on just before I arrive and turn off quietly behind me. And I don't turn around anymore because there's no need to check what's following when I already know exactly how it walks and how closely it matches me and how patiently it waits for the moment I forget to count. It's strange how endings announce themselves, not with a clear break, but with a thinning of resistance, like a door left slightly open long enough that you stop noticing the draft. And I think that's what this feels like now, because the nightly check-ins have become so automatic that I sometimes catch myself reaching for the phone before the reminder appears, and when it does, it feels redundant, like confirmation of something already settled. And there are days when I wonder if this is what stability was supposed to feel like all along, because nothing dramatic happens anymore, and nothing feels out of place. And the world responds to me with a smooth predictability that makes planning unnecessary and improvisation feel wasteful. And the quiet satisfaction that comes with that is unsettling, precisely because it works, and because it rewards me for staying within the lines. And I think back to the early nights in the building, when every sound felt loaded with threat, and every rule felt like a warning. And I realize now that fear was part of the transition, because fear sharpens attention, and attention accelerates learning. And once the learning was complete, fear was no longer required. And that absence is what scares me now, because it means there's nothing left to push against. And I've started to notice that I don't daydream the way I used to, because my thoughts tend to follow efficient paths and arrive at practical conclusions. And when something unexpected does intrude, it feels like static rather than inspiration. And I gently steer away from it without thinking. And sometimes I wonder if I'm doing that because I've learned that deviation is uncomfortable, or because deviation no longer offers anything compelling, and that uncertainty sits at the center of everything, like a locked room I walk past every day without trying the handle. And there are moments when I catch a glimpse of myself in reflective surfaces, and I recognize the posture and the neutral expression and the way my eyes seem focused slightly ahead of where I actually am. And it reminds me of the version of me I saw on the monitor standing somewhere I hadn't reached yet. And I understand now that that wasn't a prediction, it was a template, and I've been aligning myself to it gradually without needing guidance. And the realization doesn't come with panic. It comes with a soft sense of completion, like finishing a long task you didn't realize you'd been working on. And occasionally, when I'm outside late at night and the streets are empty, I feel that old impulse to stop and listen and count. And when I do, the city feels cooperative, like it's holding still for me. And there's a sense then that I could stand there, indefinitely suspended between steps, and nothing would force me to move. But something would note the delay and adjust. And that knowledge keeps me going, because motion is part of the agreement. And stagnation feels like a question I don't want to ask. And I think about the building less and less now, not because it's faded, but because it's no longer relevant in the way a classroom isn't relevant once you've learned the lesson. And sometimes I imagine it sitting empty with its lights turning on and off, according to patterns that no longer need a person to walk them. And I wonder if someone else is there now, counting and adapting and feeling that first prickle of unease. And I hope for their sake that they're good at routines, because routines are easier than rebellion and safer than curiosity. And there's a night recently when I wake just before the check-in without any external cue. And I lie there in the dark, listening to the familiar stillness. And for a moment, I consider not marking it complete. Not out of defiance, but out of a quiet desire to see what happens when a verified presence becomes uncertain, and the thought hangs there longer than usual, and the room feels attentive in a way that's almost respectful, like it's giving me space to decide, and I feel a faint echo of the fear I used to know. And it's comforting in its clarity, because fear at least confirms that there's still a choice. And I lie there, counting slowly. Not because I hear footsteps, but because counting helps me measure time. And when I reach 10, I stop and wait. And the waiting stretches and nothing intrudes. And for a brief, fragile moment, I feel separate again, like I'm standing just outside a pattern rather than inside it. And then the reminder appears softly on my phone without sound, and the pressure settles in, not as a threat, but as an expectation. And I understand then that the system doesn't need enforcement because it's already integrated into me, and whatever I choose will be logged either way, as compliance or as anomaly. And anomalies don't disappear. They just get studied and adjusted until they fit. And I mark the check-in complete because I don't want to become a data point. And the relief that follows is immediate and smooth, and the room seems to relax. And I lie there staring into the dark, knowing that this is what the end looks like. Not a confrontation or an escape, but a quiet acceptance that feels indistinguishable from peace. And as I drift toward sleep, I realize I'm counting again, without meaning to, and I stop before reaching 10 because I don't need to finish anymore. And the stillness remains attentive and patient and familiar. And I know with a calm certainty that if I ever did manage to step completely out of sequence, the world wouldn't rush to correct me. It would simply wait and learn and adapt the way it always has. And that knowledge settles over me like a blanket. And the last thing I think before sleep is that the night shift never really ends. It just becomes internal and continues quietly, as long as I'm here, moving forward one anticipated step at a time.